Welcome to Gafferpedia.
Thanks.
We're here with Lachlan Mill, and we're talking about the juxtaposition between being an audiovisual tech and working in rock and roll. And Lachlan, we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, before I got to rock and roll.
Yes. I think you were pretty much fresh out of high school.
Uni,
yes.
Yeah, well, if you count it, uni.
Yeah. And you have been, we came to us through one of the crewing agencies actually, but and started as a casual. But you've progressed into rock and roll. So let's just quickly tell us a little bit that journey, how that happened.
Well, that was always the plan.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions. Was that?
Yeah, I think because as I've progressed further into it, I realised people kind of either come from being a musician and they kind of hope they'll be a musician forever.
Yeah.
And then they realise they either have kids or they just need the money. So they start falling into corporate, and then corporate gets very comfortable and the music part kind of fades away, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realise is a lot of DJs as well. Like I've been meeting a lot of lighting people recently where they're all like, oh, I used to be a DJ. I'm like, no, I was an musician. And they're all like, oh, we used to be ex-DJs. We still carry our USB sticks around and all that stuff. So it kind of makes sense. Everyone kind of has some flow of tech or musician to then end up there.
Yep.
But that's why I always thought I'd do rock and roll because I thought I'd be able to I'd work for bands that are bigger than me, and then I would play and hopefully make those connections and use those connections to play bigger gigs myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was always kind of the plan.
Are you still playing?
No.
No.
I still dabble in the studio doing bits. I've got all my studio gear and everything still because that was obviously the dream originally.
Yep.
I've still got walls of guitars and pedals stacked up, and
Yeah.
I still got a synth rack and all that stuff, but it just sits there, which sucks because I've just got the sheds just full of too many other projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a 3D printer going at the moment, which is kind of fun. So
yeah.
lots of new toys,
Right.
just not music
We'll
toys.
park that because I'll talk about the people. Some people love the toys and some people not so, but that's...
It's an interesting... when I meet techs, I just don't understand how they don't have heaps of toys because I'm one of those people that have heaps of them. But a lot of people prefer just to use other people's, which I find very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as I said, I mean, obviously we've come from the audiovisual core. I mean, obviously we're musicians and played in bands and all that stuff too, but...
I'm pretty sure we got rooms full of synths as well.
Yes.
yeah, sure.
But you made a conscious effort to stay in both, or you used to say it was part of the plan all along to do both?
I think after I finished RMIT doing sound production, I was like, oh, I'll do a sound.
Yes.
And I'll do sound for bands. But as you probably would know, it's very hard to you either do small pub rooms constantly, and half the time that doesn't give you enough money or enough work. Because unfortunately in Melbourne and Australia, we can only really work on the weekends most of the time.
Yeah.
We don't really have flowing, unlike London, everywhere it's a show every night.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to find things to work on your day job. And I really didn't want to keep working in retail, which is where I was working at the time.
Yeah.
So lucky enough, I started working in a crewing company, and then I met yourself, which has all worked out really well. And then I just happened to be lucky enough to work with heaps of great people. So I just fell more and more into the corporate because I liked who I worked with and I liked the work.
Yeah.
And I've definitely got nothing against working in corporate. You know
And
what I
how
mean?
do you find, you had a shift today in corporate AV?
Yeah.
So
I was hanging lights, so I don't know.
hanging lights. Oh, okay, well, that's what I was going to
But it was corporate, but
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, but you still do corporate.
Yeah.
gigs with
I would
different
say
laptops.
It used to still be maybe 70% corporate and 30% rock and roll until about a year ago or 2 years ago. And then I was lucky enough to really get onto massive tours over the last 2 years. So that's become a lot more rock and roll, but it's maybe still 50-50.
Yeah.
I reckon. I still have 5 months of work worth of corporate, and then I have a month off maybe, and then 6 months of touring. I don't know. It's a bit 50. It's very
So
50-50.
not so much every day different, more of it seasonal.
It's a mixture of seasonal, but yeah, you're right. A lot of time I'll be doing 5 days a week in corporate, and I'll run off and do a Friday and a Saturday night gig at local pubs.
Yep.
And then maybe, here or there months I'll just disappear and do tours. I was away 5 months last year.
Yeah, because you're in Europe and London.
Yeah, I was in Europe and the UK twice, and then a month in the US.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Which is good. That's awesome.
So how does that, is that kind of two different approaches? When you walk into a corporate gig and then when you walk in to do a tour, is it
It's a good question.
kind of this? I mean, they're different, but are they kind of the same approach, or do you really have to think about them differently?
I think I'm very thankful that I did corporate first, because I think it's given me a good mindset of having respect for everyone and coming in and being like, I don't care this is rock and roll. I want it to look perfect still. You know what I mean? And sometimes you get over pedantic, you just got to let it go. But generally, I think my mindset, because I've come in from corporate, I want it to look really neat. And you're so used to going in hard and fast that, I don't know, I've just got that skill to come in and think about it the same way. So I kind of think, you're right, I think I've just blended both in my mind, and then I just have the same attitude everywhere I go. I think it's probably a good way of putting it.
Because we've probably seen that before when you're working with people that have come from rock and roll and they start doing corporate. And you might have to say, oh, guy, you can't just have that dragon across there, mate.
Correct.
You got to
struggle to
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Oh, that's interesting. So you don't really struggle then because you basically apply the same methodology.
Yeah, I think because I have slowly worked my way into rock and roll, when that was always the plan, I was just doing so much corporate, and I was doing like, I'd work, I didn't want to cancel my corporate work because you get like 4 or 5 days or to be booked out for a certain amount of time. So you'd get to the Friday and I'd do a 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. and then I'd rush to a venue in Melbourne, and I'd quickly do rock and roll and just hope that that relationship would grow with the artist. Because I live in a really weird pocket, because I don't work for any rock and roll lighting companies. It's very different to how I know every other lighting person, because they all know each other. But I don't know many of them. And it's because all my clients are just directly me trying to work with an artist. So I'll just appear with an artist and do the show or whatever, which means you probably won't meet other lighting people on the gigs unless it's a festival. And I haven't really done the time in those other lighting companies to meet all these other people in Melbourne, you know?
So you corporate AV guy, studied audio, wanted to be an audio guy. How did you jump to lights?
Well, also the weird thing is I'm now teaching at RMIT. Well, I'm a professional practitioner coming in. I don't have my TSA, but coming in and doing helping with the teachers and stuff. The course that because you get taught a bit of lighting in the sound production course now. So now I'm doing the lighting to the sound guys in the course I did 10 years ago.
Because I've heard they've moved it a bit more to be an AV course, right?
Yeah, well, they did start doing an AV course, but they've kind of gone, how about we just take this? Because the sound people need to know how to do a bit of lighting. Because you're always going to end up in a pub or in a random small venue, and you need to be able to fix a few things. So it's great. And also I always say the best way to learn is probably go to corporate, because they're you can easily just get loading gigs and surround yourself, and they'll just hire you to do loading gigs, whereas rock and roll's kind of harder to get into.
And so that's cool, the approach you said you took. You're actually latching on to the artists themselves who...
because my objective is more personal based. You know what I mean? Like, I want the relationship with everyone and be able to be mates, and just... Because like touring's realistically more based around being mates with the people.
Well, you got to put up with each other,
I'm lucky enough I was just on tour with the Omnific, which are 2 bass players and a drummer, which are awesome. And I didn't know them very well prior to the tour, but now they're really good mates of mine, so that's worked out really well.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry, what was your question before?
Oh, well, you moved to audio.
Oh, how did I switch?
Yeah.
That's a really weird situation. I was hanging out with some of the corporate guys that I work with at Ozstage, and a lot of those guys were doing Rainbow Serpent at the time, and they asked if I wanted to come and do it. And I'm like, I haven't had a chance to do a festival yet. I've been working my ass off to get to this point, and I haven't really been invited. So it's so funny to make good relationships with all these corporate guys and end up at a festival. And so we were doing monitors at the only band stage at Rainbow Serpent. And I did 2 years of that, and then we moved to doing lights at main stage at Rainbow still. So we're doing lights at main stage, and I just realised after the first year of me doing monitors at Rainbow Serpent, I hadn't been to a rave before, a proper dance festival, and I was walking around and I went, audio here's boring. The lighting here's amazing. There's lasers, there's just, everything. And I just kind of was, all of a sudden this world just exploded, and I hadn't seen it before. And so our stage, I kept kicking off who was doing lighting, and I just kept staying up all night after my shifts, and I was playing with the lighting, and the other guys were showing me, because those guys had done everything, because they do work in AV, so they've been taught a bit of everything. And I just kept playing, and then the next year I'm like, I only want to do lights this year, even though I was still doing audio. And then of the third year in, I was like, I think I'm done with audio. I still do monitors for some festivals, and I still do bits and pieces, and I always get chucked on to tune lecterns do mixed stuff in AV. I still do a lot of vision and audio and lights. But the reason I made a lighting company is because I was like, well, this is what I want to do now. So it's the best way to put my best foot forward is to be like, just tell people I'm a lighting guy.
Yeah.
It's the only way I'm going to be able to push through in this industry is say I'm a lighting guy and don't say anything else.
Yeah.
Because rock and roll don't like it when you do multiple things.
Right.
Okay, because it's kind of very different to corporate. Like
Correct.
someone, they love an all-rounder.
Yeah, so I was being brought up in corporate that I should tell everyone, I'm like, oh no, I like doing everything. And I quite often get put on corporate gigs and do all three. Like it doesn't bother me. Tell people all the time, it just kept shooting me in the foot with rock and roll. Because they like immediately have disrespect for you. They immediately just go, oh, well, that means you're a master of nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And just kind of shun you out.
Yeah.
So you have to go in and go, I do lights. And then everyone goes, okay, you do lights. That's fine.
Yeah.
So that's why I started saying that, because it was the only way to really, everything changed after I switched to saying I do lights.
Wow.
And you bought a bit of kit.
Yeah.
So essentially you're putting yourself and your gear on these tours.
Yeah. And I have a little console and I have a slightly bigger console. And they're both fully flyable, so I just take them with my tours. And so if it's with your own artists and they want to hire stuff in, I don't want to be able to offer them packages. So they're like, hey, everything comes from me.
Yeah.
And which means if something breaks, it's my problem. And it's just, you know what I mean? I feel like it's an easier approach because you go, this is my gear. I know it works perfectly good.
Yeah.
If it goes bad, I'll go fix it because it's my problem.
And so is that peace of mind, like obviously you're getting hires and stuff out of it, but is that your peace of mind as well? Just knowing you're rocking up with your gear, you know it inside and out, you know you've looked after it.
Yeah, I think also some of the funny problem is because I don't work for any lighting companies. A lot of my mates that work for lighting companies, when they come in, they go, oh, I'll just hire this from, I just grabbed this from ResX or Phase Shift or whatever. Like they grabbed a bunch of stuff because they know them.
Yes.
And they took it on their tour. Whereas I don't know any of these guys, so it'd have to come from corporate companies, which don't own that much lighting, a lot of them.
Charge twice as much.
And depending how good your relationship with it, they'll probably charge you most of that price.
Sure.
So the artist can't afford all that. So this way I can do really cheap discounts for the artist, which they can afford, and I get to have more toys on the tour.
Yeah.
So I enjoy myself more. I come out with a better product, and then the artist doesn't pay as much. And it doesn't really bother me because it's obviously with me.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm not going to break my own stuff, and if I do, it's obviously my problem. But I don't mind going cheaper because it kind of makes sense compared to double handling through another company. And it's just a lot of things.
Saves you time and a few headaches as well.
Yeah, just
makes
take it with you.
it more enjoyable, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And most stuff I've planned so I can work a way to fly it. So I've got a lot of empty pellet cases lined up. So if someone wants ever, I'll just build a kit or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I also own my own in-ears systems and wireless systems as well. Just Sennheiser stuff, but that way it's the same thing. Here's a whole kit. Here's a pop artist kit. Here's a rap setter kit or whatever. Yeah.
Nice.
Just making it easy for people. Like it's all there. You don't have to think.
Yeah, that's what I
think
want.
about that sort of thing.
Yeah. So if someone does talk to me and go, "Oh, we'd love to have you on lights," it's like, "Oh, by the way, I have all this stuff. So do you want to just use all this?" And that way it's there. And they're like, "Yeah, cool."
Do you find audio guys? Do a lot of people do that kind of thing? Like, would an audio guy, other people often have like a monitor rig and try and upsell their own gear, or is it something that you've just sort of brought to it?
I feel like that comes back to the topic we were talking about earlier, which is I think it's interesting who likes to own kit and who doesn't. Because I'm a person that likes to own all the gear and I liked having all the toys to play with and get my head around everything. I find it really funny talking to people that don't want to have stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't really grasp that concept, but obviously it makes sense. And their life obviously seems so much simpler.
Yeah. Well, I often, because I like gear as well. So I'll often think of it not really from a business point of view. Sometimes I'll be like, I really want this. How can I make it work? Make business sense after the fact.
Yeah. And I'm sure you were the same. I suppose you were the same as well. My parents, a lot of people call it the disease when you get obsessed with buying guitar pedals and guitars and all that stuff when I was younger. I caught up with an old mate the other day and they were saying, they were like, oh, so the disease just moved for you. Now you just buy lights. I'm like, pretty much.
Yeah.
And the price tag went up a lot.
Yeah.
Did it start before that though? Was it BMXs before?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
Before it was drum kits and synthesizers.
It was BMXs.
It was buying new alloy grips or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. My BMX was pretty blinged out.
You kind of,
but I think it was more I used to pick up things off hard rubbish and rip them apart. Like I was electrocuted a couple of times when I was younger and stuff because I was just ripping things out and plugging things in. And
so it's good fun.
Yeah.
So what's next? Is it more gear? A little warehouse?
That's a good question.
My
stuff is in a little warehouse at the moment,
but keep going? But it's all you at the moment. It's just one man.
I think always what I wanted was I don't want to be hiring people. I want to be able to have enough kit to do my own shows. And then if it gets bigger, then I don't know if I'll limit it or not. We'll see how it grows.
Yeah.
I think at the moment I really like that I can do a tour kit or I can do a little festival stage.
Yeah.
And if someone asks me, I can just jump into it and I hire some mates.
Yep.
Because obviously I know a lot of people in the industry, so I've got plenty of friends to come and help for doing some fun gigs. But I did 2 gigs last year that I was probably pushing it. I shouldn't have been doing by myself.
Yeah.
It was like 2 van loads.
Right.
And I went in and put it the night before because I didn't want to hire someone and did it the night after.
Yeah.
Pulled it out by myself.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a good question, and I don't know. My plan is to not hire people at the moment, but
it's a big decision, like, because it's almost like crossing that threshold to a different aspect of it.
whole different
And
level.
yeah, because you own a business, then
Yeah.
you've got to look after people and.
because you obviously got into it for that passion for what you do. And I can relate to that as well. And other people that do it purely from more of a business side of things would be thinking, oh yeah, we'll grow, we'll go here. But when you do that, it takes you away from what you loved doing in the first place. Like you end up doing less of that and more business stuff. And it's
100%.
like, is this what I want to spend my time doing? I got into it because I liked
Yeah. No,
like
you're
doing
so
the
right.
work. Yeah.
That is a big problem. That is something I think about all the time. It's like as soon as I jump into this, then you're a proper business owner and you will no longer do gigs. You're going to get too busy and too big or whatever, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then you just have to throw other people on it and you're just doing admin.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think
like-
you've said this
the,
before,
the
Linton.
best teacher
Yeah.
becomes the principal, and they've lost the best teacher. It's an admin job at school. So.
But I do, in terms of that stuff, I do like teaching new people. And if you're teaching new people with your own equipment and you can do your own shows and then you get to see people flourish, I do like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that will be a thing in the future. But at the moment, I'm trying to secure a future at this point in terms of I want to be able to get the business to a point where I could grow into that and then you could have kids and I can stop touring if I have to.
Yeah.
And this can, you don't have to be going out on gigs and you're still making money.
But I guess you're at a stage where that's really a really enjoyable part of it. So why not keep doing it while that's what you want to do? And then if you do want to do something different in the future, you've set yourself up.
For sure. That's exactly like I'm trying to keep things in the middle at the moment and then I can go one way or the other if I'm lucky. Or maybe I'll sell everything and then go do something else. But
Yeah.
Do you,
something else catch your eye?
How do you schedule? Like, obviously, corporates are ringing you. People are saying, "Can you work on Tuesday?" Do you run some? It's just in your diary.
No, it's just a diary. I've got a Google calendar that has about 9 different what do you want to call it? Calendars in it?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
what they're called on
Yeah,
Google.
yeah.
So one's like my dry, like I've got different colors, so I can see if I look at it, it's like, oh, that's corporate, or that's rock and roll, or that's a lock and light gig that I need to concentrate because it's my personal gig,
Yeah,
so I need to do some admin or whatever. And then I got a dry hire one, and a few other ones.
Yeah.
So, and I've got a personal one obviously as well. So you can just, and it's funny as you flick through my calendar, you can see the seasonal things change. Like January is all red, which is all personal.
Yeah.
Because I'm just kind of like trying to chill and enjoy that and stuff. And then the rest, then all of a sudden it just gets, it's interesting how you can see the flow of what
If
interests
you open up the whole year, you can see what.
as the colors change and stuff.
Yeah.
And it is, it's interesting, but I'm like, I don't feel too fatigued by.
So you can balance it.
Yeah. I think when I was younger, I couldn't. I think when I was younger, I'd say yes to everything and I was just doing corporate flat out. And then I was literally running to gigs Friday, Saturday and working daytimes.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of years there where it was really intense. Whereas now it's kind of like if corporate gig comes in and it's worth the right gig, I'll take it and I'll try and frame it correctly, give myself a week off to try and look after lock and light stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. It's funny how that works though, because like obviously you had those couple of years where it's crazy and you're working your butt off and everything, but it's almost like doing that builds a reputation that you can then use later on to, manage your time better and everything. But that hard work's paid off in the sense that you're able to do that.
I think it was worth doing that in my 20s, and as moving into my 30s this year, I think this is like the crunch time as well to then build the business correctly. But you just have to change how you're doing it. Like the 20s are like hard and fast and just work your ass off so you can build that relationship, those relationships and stuff. And now in your 30s, it's like you still got to crunch, but you got to work another way.
Yeah.
A more sustainable way of doing it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Like saying the 20s, you're doing everything, you're building a whole bunch of relationships. And then now you can kind of think about what relationships you want. You can pick and choose from those and which ones work well for you, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but you need to kind of experience it all in that madness.
Yeah, especially when you move into this, like once you move into your 30s, I think there's a certain not reputation, but like something you expect. If you meet someone of a certain age, I would expect them to have a certain set of goals and skills and drive to be in the right place at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, people can get into it later in life, but it's just the way that I see someone. If they're probably over their 30s, I'll be like, okay, well, they're at this level.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if they're not, you're kind of like, what were you doing in your 20s? And they could have been doing something different. Then you have a conversation with them about it, obviously. But you're right. I think me doing that in my 20s has got me to a certain level of skill level that when people meet me, they're like, okay, you suit what I was expecting, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, actually, beyond,
Set yourself up.
you exceed that, I think. I mean, you've always been very driven and very enthusiastic and very passionate. And, you know, not everyone in their 20s worked as hard as you have.
Yeah, maybe.
No, you've definitely
Work hard, party
always
hard, I'm
been
sure.
very driven. What or who really, I suppose, inspired that, do you think?
I have no idea.
No?
There isn't really anything I don't think there's any moment that I can think of that I'm like, oh, I saw that and went, I really want to do that. I think I've always just been really tech driven.
Yeah.
And then when I was younger, I was playing in bands and I'm like, oh, this makes sense that I like the tech stuff. So I'd start playing with the tech music stuff.
Yep.
And then that just kind of kept spitballing. I can't think of it. There was no one like in particular or something I did when I was younger. I don't think that I was like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's kind of innate, like you were picking things up off the road and electrocuting yourself. Like there's that drive is almost like
Yeah.
part of you just sort of pointed in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah. And besides doing extreme sports, I guess, there wasn't really anything that's ever like else that I've wanted to do. So I guess it's easy because I'm not really stretched. I've got a lot of hobbies, but like I was never stretched for like the drive of the career. Whereas maybe other people have like, they're not 100% certain on one way, so they don't go head first just yet.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about anything else, and I knew I wasn't good enough at sport. So
Yeah.
not that I played regular sport, just extreme sports.
Or a snowboarder and
Yeah, snowboarding, skate a lot, and BMX, downhill riding.
Mountain biking? So
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I think, and I love the water and stuff like that as well when I was younger, so I was brought up by the beach. So I think all that, it's interesting that I don't really do that much anymore because all I'm doing is tech stuff.
Yeah.
So
there's a certain adrenaline that comes with that sort of activity. I
well,
suppose.
as my partner said, she said it makes sense you work for a lot of metal bands because like you clearly have a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and that's what keeps you. The intensity of the job that you do, where you have to go in and it like, because I would never work in theatre because it's a bit slow for me. I don't really like going to the same venue every day that's already set up. I couldn't just come in and sit down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a really intense drive behind it. And I guess that's what she's saying. She's like, you're a bit of adrenaline junkie, so it makes sense that you would have gone from hard and fast kind of in your sporting stuff to just your gigs are hard and fast, and also you work for a lot of metal bands, so everything's just strobing and really intense and fast paced. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you've always said you've worked for me on and off for a long time now. But you always had an intensity and an urgency, which is, I think, is fairly uncommon for a young person. I felt.
That's good.
Yeah. No, you're a very inspiring young man.
Do you find that, like, obviously you said you had all these, you've got a lot of hobbies, but you're sort of busy at the moment. Do you find that the work, obviously going on tours and stuff like that, and someone's going on tour now than the aeroplane overhead, are you getting that satisfaction out of the work, or are you finding that maybe you want to make some time in the future where you can get back to some of those other hobbies, or are you sort of getting what you need at the moment out of the work?
I think as I'm moving in, like as of the last year, I think I'm noticing it's like I'm stoked that the touring stuff's really settling in, and that's what I've always wanted to do. So when I'm on tour, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is what I want. But when I'm home, I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should be setting aside more personal things.
Yeah.
And so I am this year, I'm trying to like, not overbook myself.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I found, like, similar thing. Like, you almost need to schedule that in to that calendar, like you're saying. And it sounds like you're doing that, like, I really want to do this. You've got to put it in your calendar so it doesn't get filled up by the next phone call, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I did say that I went to South America 5 years ago, so when I was 25, and I did a bunch of hiking, and I did, Machu Picchu and like heaps of high altitude hiking with low oxygen, and I was like, I don't know why I've been doing this. This is what I'm missing in my life. I really need to get back into doing this and really focus on make sure I make time for that.
Yeah.
And now 5 years later, I haven't done any of that again. So we'll see where I'm at in 5 years. I probably still won't do it, but I'm saying in the moment I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's very easy to just get in. The ball keeps on rolling, isn't it? Like,
yeah. And I think at the moment, the other half of the year isn't really booked out yet, but that just changes in an instant without me even thinking about it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden everything changes and you're like, oh, that whole year's gone now.
Well, I guess as we're coming into European summer,
Yeah.
you're looking at going back.
It's in the works. There's a few things booked,
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're not 100% locked in.
And these are small to medium sort of artists, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't really work for any big artists. Which
They're headlining or support?
yeah, all headlining mostly.
But smaller venues.
They're all small venues to a degree.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces in the Forum, which is like 1,500
Yep.
cap. But most of them are more like 600 cap venues. But it's very, very mixed.
Yeah.
I do anything. It's the same thing I say to people in corporate as well. I pretty much do anything between I've done anything between 50 people and 3,000 people.
Yeah.
It's pretty standard. I mean, festival, I've done, more people to festivals, obviously, more people. But my standard thing is I'm like, I can do anything from 50 to 3,000. No worries. So.
And life on the road, traveling around Europe, it's a what's it like? You're just in a small van, those classic kind of old stories of, small gigs, bands.
Well, last year was very crazy between my two different tours. So with the Omnific, I was in a tour bus and we had 22 people on the tour bus. It was fully loaded. It was all three bands. And it was pretty, it's pretty rough in terms of like you fall into the bus and you go to sleep and you wake up in your next venue and you're just constantly driving. And because we were the support act on this tour, because we were in Europe, I go pretty intense with my lighting planning.
Yeah.
So I'll wake up and I'll get the patch for the next venue and put things together and do some weird time coding stuff and mix stuff around and, spend heaps of time getting the rig laid out perfectly so all my effects run perfectly. And by the time I've done that, you're at the venue again and you've got to start.
Yep.
And because they're the support band, you actually don't have that break because you've got to load in everyone and to help everyone in. You get all the lighting up with the other lighting people, you kind of get them going. And then you're like, oh, crap. Now it's our time to sound check. And then there's half an hour before doors and then you got to play.
Yeah.
I guess you have a break after that before the main band plays. But I feel like when you're a headline band, you have more time. It's a bit more structured.
Yeah.
This is a bit more rough in between things. But that was a month. And then we switched to playing. I went to Eastern Europe and we were in a rough little van and we were trying to sleep in the van. And, and I came back with a really bad chest infection and I'd had rhinovirus, which is just a really heavy common cold and stuff. And I slept for 3 days and my partner was like, I'm taking you to the doctors. Went to the doctors, got on antibiotics and then went back on tour 2 days later.
Right.
The antibiotics, lucky enough, cleared me up over a day or two.
Yeah.
Went straight on an interstate tour for a week and a half.
Yeah.
Came home, was home for like 3 weeks, then went back to Europe. Back to UK, sorry. But the second tour was 2 months with Auntie Donna, which is a comedy trio.
Right.
And that was almost like a corporate tour. There was nice hotels.
Yeah.
They had a travel day in between every single show. We flew everywhere unless it was a really short drive. So between the two was crazy because it was like really rough and rock and roll, but you're drinking and you're having fun and it's party, like kind of partying. Whereas the Donna tour was like, you do the show, everyone chills. You might go out and get dinner after, and then you go to you chill in your own room.
But you're comfy.
But you're very comfortable.
Get to sleep well.
And I had to I was kind of like looking for more games to play and everything because I'm like, I've got so much time. And I had so much time because the boys didn't have a real support person. You literally got in, you were your own person, rocked up with my own console. Most of the time it was I put my own lighting in, so the show just worked. And I could program for hours as most lighting people can. You just keep programming until it's perfect. And even then you won't stop. You just keep programming. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
I can always program till doors, even if I have too long. But in this case, it was just weird to show up, have heaps of time, relax in the venue, work in these beautiful old theatres and try and learn the theatre lingo because I don't do theatre.
Yeah.
So I've got all these theatre people yelling lingo at me that I have no idea what's going on and I'm meant to be the head LD.
Yep.
But going into the UK and the US, like ancient theatres was really cool.
Yeah.
So that was so juxtaposition between that and that.
Did you get a chance to see anything else while you were there?
Not really.
No.
Because with those guys, I had more time, obviously, but it still was a little bit too rushed in terms of trying to see stuff. But I saw a fair bit of New York and LA, which was kind of really cool.
Nice.
So I'm really happy. You get to see all the world, and you get really, really great time to build new relationships and hang out and do all that stuff. But it is also very fast.
Yeah.
You know.
So is a mix of that good? Like a bit of comfy stuff,
Exactly.
mixed in with a bit of chaos for a bit of fun.
Well, that's why I tell people if you want to do rock and roll, you should get good relations. I'm lucky enough to have really good relations in corporate, so I can always fall back onto that.
Yeah.
So I have this real good safety net. I think that a lot of people don't have, because a lot of people do full rock and roll and then go, oh, I've got to do some corporate gigs, and they kind of call up some companies they've worked for, and they can get work there and they have good relationships. But I'm like, because I think I was doing it for so long, there's so many companies I can call and go, oh, I'm in trouble. Can you fill me in? And they'll just, people will just fill my calendar, which is I'm really thankful for.
So is that sort of what, obviously tours, they're planned ahead of time, they go for a long time. So is corporate something that's more like a short term, I'm back guys, what do you got? Or does it get hard to plan if someone wants you for a corporate gig, but then a tour might come up? Like, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
I'm trying to say no to weekends now for corporate. Yeah. Because I'm like, either I'll have the weekend off or a gig will appear. And at least I can do local gigs. So that won't screw me on that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're totally right. That is hard to juggle because you might get offered something you're like, oh, what if I get offered something that's rock and roll? But obviously you definitely need to buffer the money with corporate, because sometimes you can't make enough money on rock and roll to afford to keep doing things, depending on the size of the band. I would love to move to more like constantly 1,500 cap venues. I wouldn't want to do stadiums because that's on a different tier, and it's different in the way you approach things. But doing big old theatres would probably be the opportune. You always get a bit of a floor package, nicer venues, and good crowds and stuff like that. And you're sure if you're playing a venue that big, you're probably sure to have a pretty big crowd. Yes. Compared to a lot of these small pub gigs or not pub gigs, but smaller venues, you might not always have a good crowd.
Yep.
But I think that also the comfiness is like, I think you need to make sure that I would tell people to do corporate and on and off with rock and roll, because it really does help you reset. Yeah. And I think I never get grumpy at corporate gigs. I mean, not that I ever have, but because I'm doing all this stuff.
Yeah, you've got that outlet. Whereas there are a lot of frustrated corporate AV people that are sitting there go, accounting again, or.
There's a lot of grumpy AV people out there, but so is rock and roll. The rock and roll people are way more grumpy because they're overworked. Most of them run themselves into the ground.
And there's a lot of that chaos that if that goes on for a whole year non-stop, I could imagine.
And then they push that chaos onto every day. So like when they come into venues and they're just intense, and you're like, there's nothing wrong here. And you're here early and everything's how they operate. Fine, but it's just the way that they've been operating for so long that they've just got this intensity.
Yeah, like the adrenaline, they're running on adrenaline so much that it comes, I guess, part of your
and I totally understand that. I totally get it. But I think if you do a slow accounting gig and then go back to do rock and roll, you're thankful for both. Yeah. And I'm happy to be at both.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ozstage, and you do a lot of work for Scene Change. Both of those companies, really good guys who seem to get the rock and roll.
Yes, that's a good thing. A good point. Some of the corporate ones don't really understand. Aren't willing to understand the concept. Well, not concept, but like understand.
Don't speak the language as such.
Yeah. Whereas if you get a lot of like Scene Change or a lot of ex rock and roll guys, but all very smart individuals, they get it. So if you're like, hey, I've got this, they're like, oh. It was amazing, man. Sympathetic. So they're like, they want you to go and prosper. Like one of the guys there always says, man, this will be here when you get back.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just go. I'd rather you be happy and go live your life for another couple of years and then come back to us when you're 35 and need money and have kids. Yeah. Then chill. Then you'll be with us the rest of your life then. Yeah. Go now. You don't need to be here. Yeah. Which is a great attitude. And also another great attitude from him is always like, if someone if you're upset about screwing up a gig, he's always like, did anyone die? And you're like...
Bit of perspective.
And so you feel horrible about it. And he's like, no one died, did they? I'm like, no. And he's like, then what's the problem?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong.
Yeah. And I think people can tell whether something went wrong or stuffed up because someone doesn't care, or it just something went wrong. And obviously you put everything into every gig. Like, and I know I've been on gigs with you, like every gig, you taking ownership of that and you want it to go well and you're putting your best foot forward, all that kind of thing. And when people can see that, things go wrong,
Yeah, I get pretty gutted when things go wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't let it affect me. I think taking from coming as an ex-musician, you're always taught as a musician, good musicians, if you screw up a note, you just keep playing and no one notices. It's the bad ones, the ones that get overwhelmed, that things going real bad and they take that to heart and they just keep getting worse.
Yeah. Plummet.
So where I'm taught, I think from a young age, is just continue.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Like, and I'll just keep going.
And it'll get forgotten.
After a couple of days, I'm like, but...
By everyone else, it'll get forgotten. You'll dwell on it for a few days. And
yeah, I definitely dwell on it more than probably other people. But
It's actually an admirable quality because it means you care.
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and hopefully that'll continue. I
Yeah.
don't intend to stop caring, hopefully.
No.
Yeah.
But I think by doing these two worlds, that will stay. You know?
So it sounds like it was a good balance of the two worlds. I think that's our title.
Balance of the two.
Two worlds.
Two worlds.
Yeah. We're trying to work out what to call the topic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like it.
So balanced well, which is good.
Yeah. And I think a lot of other rock and roll people do balance their time with theatre. So I'd say the three types would be AV, or corporate/AV, which means you can do, anything.
Yes.
That everyone wants you to be good at all three.
Yep.
Yeah.
Vision, lighting, and audio.
Yep.
Whereas theatre's getting close to the creative side, and they're a little bit more slow because they have a mindset to like everything needs to be perfect, and they'll meticulously go over everything for weeks.
Yep.
They have time to plot for weeks, whereas we don't have that in rock and roll and corporate AV. It's all hard and fast in and out. So they're taught, it's a little bit different style.
Yep.
But it means they've got a really great eye for seeing stuff because that's where they're meticulously looking at stuff. And I find that a lot of people at rock and roll will go do in-house theatre gigs instead of going to the corporate thing.
Yeah. I guess it's still a show, isn't it? So it's kind of like...
And it's still a fixed venue. So it's another thing. It's local and it's always the same place kind of vibe. You know what I mean? And that's what we're looking for. When we're off the road, you need somewhere that's local. It's always the same place.
Yeah.
Probably also suits.
Not always the same place, sorry, but like local.
The night owl. I mean, it's the same sort of timings.
That's true.
As opposed to
corporate, I'd start at 5 a.m.
5 a.m. start. That's a whole different thing to deal with.
Yeah, and I very often have to. I think when I was touring with Seth Century, Dave, the sound guy, which I also work at Scene Change with, we did a tour. I was doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with Seth Century, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday with Scene Change for a month. And I hadn't really thought about it, but that was how the time booked out. And he's like, well, no, as we were flying in, he's like, look at the juxtaposition between these events. We've been literally drinking at each show every night for the last 4 nights or whatever. And we've been in Queensland or whatever. And then we're flying back into Melbourne. It's raining and we've got to go straight onto like building a LED screen and sitting through 4 days of a sales gig.
Yes.
And he's like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
And this is our life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do this most weeks.
Yeah.
Like a real busy switch.
Yeah.
And how's your partner with that?
She's great. I think you can't. There's a very particular type of person that is partner of a AV/tech. Most relationships don't last through it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a very particular person that always understands because they just get it.
Yeah.
I think the good thing for me is I'm away a lot, which is a new thing. But when we met, I was working so much that I only saw her 1 day a week. So now we're living together. I settled down for a couple of years and I was around a bit more. And then now it's kind of like I'm away a lot, but then I'm home heaps.
Yeah.
Like she's getting a bit sick of me now because I've been home for 2 months straight.
Yeah.
Like,
Go on to her.
yeah. She's like, when are you going back to work? You've been here a lot.
Yeah. Have you ever had like a full-time job, or have you just freelance and sort of mix and match things the whole way through? Or
I've been part-time with Scene Change and full-time with Scene Change, but both of them only lasted the probation period.
okay.
It's just not my style.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
With the whole adrenaline part and everything, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to go to the same place every day, even though I love working with those guys.
Yeah.
And as I've said to them, they're probably the only people that would say yes in corporate to a full-time gig. Because I've been there for so long and I know all the gear and, all that stuff. I'm comfortable there and everyone's great. But yeah, I did part full-time for a month and I was still trying to like do gigs, like rock and roll gigs. I'm not going to say no to my rock and roll gigs because that's my plan to be my future.
Yeah.
It got way too hard.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing that Seth Century weird run, it was when I was part-time with them. And I was like, this is sustainable.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to say no to the tours but I'm stuck doing part-time for you guys. I'm like, I can't keep doing this. It's not good for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I've been back to casual constantly.
Yeah.
But I haven't done full time for anything else.
Yeah. Makes it like you obviously you want to take advantage of opportunities. You want to be able to do that thing. And like some people like when you are part-time or full-time, you've got that reliability, you know where your money's coming from, you know what you have to do. Some people like that, but obviously you can't say yes to things like, and so.
Yeah. I want to make everyone happy, which is hard.
Yeah.
And it's easier when you're casual to make everyone happy. Because you just say yes or no. And if someone calls you and says, oh, you're meant to be here today, or I really need you here today or something, it's like, sorry, I said no ages to the, you know what I mean? Like I've already said no and I can then let myself go. That's fine. I already said no to them a while ago. It's not my fault. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's full time, I'm trying to make them real, like, you know, you're looking after too many people.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a grey area, isn't it? It's like, well, I didn't really sign on for all this, for the, you know, I always wanted these Fridays off because I have this thing. And they're like, yeah, I know, but this came up. And then you kind of feel a bit guilty because everyone else is doing it. But it's like, I
agreed to saying I'm not going to work Fridays because I needed Fridays time for my own business.
Yeah, yeah. So it's always this push and pull, isn't it?
Yeah. And then technically, if I'm running my own business, you shouldn't be full time for someone.
No.
You can't really be full time with someone
because you can't
do
necessarily
everything.
Your commitments aren't quite aligned.
No, because your commitments technically would be to the full time place and not your own full time company.
Yeah. So you're conflicted anyway. So
yeah.
So you have no choice. You got to just.
I have to stay freelancing. Yeah. Maybe in the future we'll see, but that depends how my own company goes, I guess.
Well, that's true, as you say. Also, as you get older and life can change. And
hopefully, if I'm lucky enough, I can get a couple of really good. I think the future best plan is to get a couple of really good relationships you build over the next 5-10 years of artists that will keep going. Like I've get along with the Auntie Donna guys really well, and because their style of touring is very relaxed. And they're, one of them's had a baby and they're probably all going to have kids eventually and all that stuff. I think our lives will align well enough that hopefully I can keep touring with them. So it's like I'll have kids and they'll have kids and they'll understand if you got to, you got to prioritize things correctly.
Yeah.
And it means if they just go and do a 2-month or 1-month tour every year, that's great. I get to go on tour with them and they get it and you're all on the same kind of page.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe getting a pop artist or another artist I've worked with that are big enough to be doing good theatres and have enough money. And then you just come home and do your own things at home. So I think I want to have a couple of good artists that you've had a relationship been with for years.
Yes.
So you're part of the woodwork with that team. You're not fighting, you're not hungry to get that.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of time you're always fighting to get these relationships with these new artists.
You are dependent on their success though, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah. So that's the hard part. I think you've just got to, you got to find the right artists that'll keep going and also build a good enough relationship that they will keep you.
Yes.
Yeah. But
that's a weird
because they can
game.
outgrow you.
Correct. Yeah. So they might just decide, okay, well, we need to move to someone else because we're doing stadiums now.
Yeah, we're giant. And,
all that stuff.
Or they could just fizzle out.
Or they get so big that they're touring every day. They become like a massive band. They're doing Europe. They're doing the whole world. And I can't keep doing it. I can't do that for a whole year. I'd love to, but
if they sign, I don't know, because it's not my world. If they're signed to record label X and tour promoter, blah blah blah, do they say no?
That has happened to me.
I want
multiple times.
Right.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah. So I've worked with a lot of artists being like, I'll do this really cheap, and I might bring some lights. So quite like when I was, a couple of years ago when all I had was a couple of movers and everything, I was just bringing them to lots of gigs, being like, oh, okay, I've made a big effort and done virtually no money for this gig, but it's looked like an expensive gig, and it's great for me to get my bearings and getting better at lighting and all that stuff. That's why I bought my own little MA console, because I was doing crappy pub gigs with 8 power cans with an MA, which is ridiculous, but it was making me better and better, and I'm so quick at it now. And so it worked out for me, but I was kind of hoping that, these bands, as they grew, they'd keep you.
Yeah.
But a lot of these bands, the promoters have stepped in or they've gone not to a label, but, I guess, the promoters or the label, and they've gone, oh, we usually use this guy.
Yeah.
And they're now at the size of this other band that they use this person, so we're going to use this person.
Yeah.
And there's kind of no discussion, which kind of really sucks.
Yeah.
And I haven't become close enough with the band that they stick up for me. Whereas I think a lot of the bands I work for now, I've got such a great relationship with them. It's like, I don't think they're going to, if someone, they'd push back.
Yeah.
If someone tried to replace me, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I guess it gets out of their hands at that point a little bit, because the bands, when you're starting out, you're organising everything yourself as a band. And as you bring more people in, you're not organising all of that back end stuff. Someone else is. And then I guess that's where you...
Same with if you bring a new production manager in, and the production manager goes, this is my team. I always use this team. We're taking them because I know how to work with them, and we all work really well together.
Yeah.
And
the techs in the band, when they get to a certain size, you don't really see each other anyway. So then it's about the techs wanting to hang out with people they want to hang out with. Whereas when they're smaller, it's like the band's like, no, we're not taking the person you want to send. We're taking our guy that might not be as good because the relationship's better with them and we're going to have a better time in general.
Yeah, but you're living in such close quarters when you're smaller.
Whereas I feel like when you're bigger, that's why the production manager goes, well, this team needs to be all mates, so we choose our own people. Yeah. Which just doesn't always work, but like that is what happens most of the time.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I know it makes sense.
So do bands, like obviously in the corporate world, people that work, you work for different businesses and then that business will tell someone else they work with. Does it work? Do bands talk and hear that other people need a lighting guy and you get recommended? So
I think
that network sort of gets you more work.
What's funny is the metal scene are all, what I always say is the metal people, they get out their emotions in a sustainable and a healthy way.
Yeah.
So like a lot of bands, like a lot of the psych bands and all that stuff, they're just a bit egotistical and not very it's weird that different styles have different like kind of mannerisms when you talk to people. And then a lot of bands, just like a lot of bands go, we don't need lights. They just don't do lights until they get to a certain size because they don't need it. It's not part of their show. Whereas a lot of metal bands is like they're so hard and fast they need lighting. Yeah,
right.
So a lot of their small gigs, they do small, tiny gigs.
Their inspirations are quite theatrical.
Correct, it is. Yeah, all that. Yeah. And so I think that also some like the big metal bands are like the best lighting, some of the best lighting you've ever seen. Because they're huge lighting packages and stuff. And so I think the metal community, they're all so lovely because they get their emotions out in a constructive way. They just. People think they're angry, but it's like they're just so chill and so nice. Like they're just the nicest people. So I think they all talk and they all want lighting people because they all want to do lighting. So they're small gigs, they need lighting. Yeah. So there's more work for lighting people in their smaller shows. Yeah. And they all talk because they're all mates. Like a lot of the metal bands are all friends. So that does happen to me a lot where they're like, oh, the other band suggested you.
It does seem like a brotherhood. Like I used to, play with bands and stuff in more of like blues and psychedelic kind of thing. Yeah. But it's like you'd see the metal guys and there just seemed to be this real brotherhood going on. Like,
it's crazy.
It's like sometimes I'd look at that and go, oh, I kind of want that. I'm not into that music myself, but it's like I kind of want that same connection. They're doing something right.
Because my style was always psych. Yeah, and I think that's where my opinion of them came from first because every time you message someone, even though they're smaller than you, they'd be like, no, we don't want to play for you. Play with you on the same stage and stuff. Yeah. Like a lot of people we message was always a bit like, nah. Yeah. Whereas as soon as we went into like doom stoner rock, everyone, like even the massive bands that should not have been responding to us were like, I'm so sorry we can't do it, but like really lovely and like, hey, maybe we'll call you the next tour. And you're like, why are you even responding to us? You're massive. And then, you know what I mean? And but you're totally right. That's what's the same thing. Every time I look at outside into the metal community, you're like, man, everyone's so chill. And like they all know each other from Instagram. So like a lot of times I'll be at a big metal show and some bands I work with are backstage just hanging out. Because they just all kind of respect each other.
So it's far more of a community than...
Yeah, like a crazy thing, the bass player from Omnific, Toby, I caught up with him like 2 days after the Evanescence show and he was like, oh man, I was hanging out with them backstage. And I'm like, what? How? And he's like, oh yeah, their bass player, I think it's a bass player. He's like, one of them's a big fan of mine on Instagram and loves Omnific. So I just went backstage at High Sense Arena or whatever. And I was like, what? How do you get these things? Like, how do you build these relationships? But it's like, because they all just kind of happy looking at other people's stuff and they're all very like, oh, I really respect that, you know?
Yep.
Very interesting.
Nice. I reckon that's a really good spot with that accolade of respect to the metal community.
I'm sure every other band, all the other styles are all lovely as well. But
well, I don't know if they actually all hang together like them.
No, that's
something
I don't think they have their own show on Channel 31, but that community does.
The blues does. I think blues are all very chummy.
Yeah. But anyway, on that bombshell, I think we say thanks very much for the chat.
Thanks for having me.
Been awesome.
Cheers, man.
And this has been Gafferpedia, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Gafferpedia is brought to you by TechBox, Hippo Event Technology, AV Hire, and Cardigan Creative. Catch you on the next episode.